There's a very specific moment that tends to happen at the end of the day. Everything's been handled, the conversations are done, decisions have been made, things have moved forward the way they needed to. And on the surface, there's nothing left that actually requires your attention. And then you stop. And your mind doesn't. It's still moving. It's still picking things up. It's still stepping ahead into what's coming next, even when there's nothing in front of you that needs to be handled. And it's easy to assume that that's just a part of operating at this level, right? That it's because you're responsible or because you're across a lot, or that it's simply how you think. But when you start to look at it more closely, there's something else happening underneath that. Something that's got less to do with what's on your plate and more to do with how your system has learned to operate. And once you see it, it changes the way you understand why switching off doesn't happen in the way that you expect it to. Let's get into this, shall we? Welcome to Project Joyful, the podcast for health-centered leaders. Project Joyful is a space for conversations at the intersection of leadership, health, and lived experience. Here we explore what it means to lead in ways that honour your body, protect long-term capacity, and support a life that feels as good on the inside as it looks on the outside. This episode is part of the Biology of Leadership series. In this series, we explore leadership through your body, not as a performance to optimize or a mindset to fix, but as a biological experience shaped over time. Leadership doesn't just live in decisions, strategies, or roles. It lives in your nervous system and how responsibility is held and how reliability and care quietly organize your body long before you're consciously aware of it. These conversations are for leaders who are capable, trusted, and effective, and who are curious about how leadership is experienced internally, not just how it performs externally. There's nothing you need to do as you listen, no insight you need to apply. This is simply an invitation to understand what's been shaping your experience of leadership beneath the surface, and what's become possible when biology becomes part of the conversation. Let's begin, shall we? So you get to the end of the day and everything's been handled. The conversations are done, decisions have been made, things have moved forward the way they needed to, and there's nothing urgent left that actually requires your attention in that moment. And then you stop. You sit down, there's that shift where the day is technically over, but your mind doesn't fully come with you. It's still moving, it's still running through parts of the day, picking up on things that are already done. And then it starts moving into tomorrow's conversations, what needs to be said, how that meeting might land, whether there's anything you need to be across before you walk into it. And almost without noticing, it's also moving into what the evening looks like, what you're going to make for dinner tomorrow night, what still needs to happen at home, who needs your attention there. And you can feel it, right? The sense that you haven't quite landed. Like part of you still slightly engaged, still lightly scanning, even though there's nothing in front of you that needs to be handled. And on the outside, everything's complete. But internally, something hasn't quite settled in the same way. And it doesn't just stop here. Because even as you move through the evening, that same background activity is still there. You might be having a conversation or making dinner or doing something completely unrelated to work. And part of your attention is still looping back through things that have already happened or stepping ahead into what's coming next. You can be halfway through something at home and suddenly you're back in a conversation from earlier, replaying a moment, adjusting what you said, or noticing something that you might refine next time. Or your mind moves forward again into that meeting tomorrow, how you want to position something, how someone might respond, what you need to be ready for when you're in it. And it starts to show up in small ways, in conversations where you're there but not fully there, in moments that are meant to feel like a break, but they don't quite land in the way that you expect them to. And that sense of still carrying the day, even when you've moved into something completely different. And by the time that you get to the end of the night, when you go to switch off and go to sleep, your mind's still moving in that same way, still picking things up, still running ahead, like something's keeping a level of readiness in place. So even when the day is technically over and you've moved through everything that you needed to, there isn't a clean shift where your system fully lets go of it. And when you start to look at that more closely, you realize that this isn't actually being driven by what's in front of you. It's not part of the conversation that you had earlier that's causing your mind to keep replaying it. And it's not tomorrow's meeting that's making you think ahead into it. What's happening is that your system has learned to stay slightly ahead of everything as a baseline way of operating. So rather than just responding to what's in front of you, there's a constant predictive loop running. Your brain's taking what's already happened, mapping it against what it expects might happen, and then rehearsing, adjusting, and preparing in advance. It's an automatic process that's designed to reduce uncertainty and keep you effective in complex environments. And it's really easy to look at that and think, well, this is just good planning. This is where my excellence lives. This is where I can lead the way I do, why I can see what's coming and why I can walk into a conversation already knowing how it's likely to unfold. And that part's true. But what's sitting alongside that is something slightly different. Because when that loop's running continuously, your brain isn't just accessing that level of thinking when it's useful. It's still running simulations, still mapping ahead, still adjusting and preparing, even when there's nothing in front of you that requires it. So your attention stays partially oriented forward. Your system keeps a level of readiness in place and your body doesn't fully shift out of that state, even in moments where there's nothing to respond to. And over time, it's that ongoing state, not the capability itself, that your system becomes used to maintaining. And as you start to see that distinction, there's often a moment where your mind goes to, well, this is the part of me that actually makes me good at what I do. This is how I stay across things. This is how I lead at the level that I lead at. And there can be a question sitting underneath that. If this changes, does something about my effectiveness change with it? We'll come back to that. Because the piece that matters first isn't how to change it. It's understanding what's actually happening when you try to switch off in the first place. Because most of the time when you think about switching off, what you're actually referring to is the absence of work. Closing the laptop, finishing the day, stepping away from your desk, moving into the evening. And on the surface, that looks complete. The work's done, so there's nothing left to engage with. But what you start to notice is that even when the work has stopped, that internal activity hasn't shifted in the same way. Your mind is still moving in that same pattern we were talking about earlier, still running those anticipatory loops, still picking things up from what's already happened and moving ahead into what might be needed next. So your attention's still partially engaged, your system's still holding that same level of readiness, even though there's nothing in front of you that requires it. And that's why it can start to feel like you don't really know how to switch off, right? Because you've done everything that marks the end of the day. And the way you're experiencing it hasn't actually changed. But what that points to is that switching off isn't the absence of work. It's the absence of that loop continuing to run in the background. It's what it feels like when your attention's no longer pulled slightly ahead of where you are, when your system isn't holding what might be needed next, when that underlying sense of readiness isn't there in the same way. And for a lot of people operating at this level, that's not something that they've actually experienced consistently. So there's nothing to map it to, nothing to reference, which is why the question of how to switch off can feel harder than it seems, because it's not just something you do, it's a different way your system operates. And when that loop isn't running in the same way, the difference is actually really specific. It's not that your mind's completely empty or that you're doing nothing. It's that your attention's fully where you are, without part of it being pulled somewhere else at the same time. So you might be in a conversation and realize you're just in that conversation. You're not tracking what you're going to say next. You're not scanning how it's landing. You're not running slightly ahead of it. You're just there, responding to what's actually being said as it happens. Or maybe you're at home, you're doing something simple and there's no part of your mind looping back through the day or moving ahead in tomorrow. You're not thinking about what needs to be said or what you need to be ready for. Your attention is just resting on what you're doing without that background layer running. And even physically, there's a difference, right? That sense of readiness just isn't there in the same way. Your body isn't subtly braced for what might be needed next. There's more of a sense of being settled, like your system's actually shifted out of that forward-leaning state. And one of the simplest ways to start noticing this is in those moments where your mind moves ahead. And instead of following it, you just recognize that it's happening. Almost like a quiet, isn't that interesting? As you notice your attention's moved out of where you are and into what hasn't happened yet. And sometimes in that same moment, you might notice a small shift in your body, like maybe your breath drops a little deeper, or even a soft sigh, like something in you releases slightly without you needing to make it happen. And it's not constant. It might show up in moments and then the loop comes back in. But when you notice it, there's a clear difference between that and the way that you usually operate. And at a certain point, this starts to shift from something you understand into something you notice as it's happening. You catch those moments where your mind has already moved ahead, where that loop is already running, where part of you is still holding what hasn't happened yet. And even in noticing it, you can feel that small shift, where your attention comes back, where your body follows, and something in you settles, even if it's just slightly. And alongside that, there's also a recognition that this isn't something that you think your way out of. You can see it, you can recognize it, you can even interrupt it in those small moments and still find yourself returning to that same baseline way of operating, because it's the state that your system has become familiar with maintaining. And that's where the question starts to change, right? Not how do I switch off, but what becomes available when my system no longer needs to stay in that constant state of readiness. That's the work we go into inside Biology of Leadership, looking at how your biology is shaping that ongoing pattern and what shifts when your system starts to operate differently at that level. It's 3 sessions across the 26th, 27th and 28th of May. And it's free. If you've been listening to this and recognizing yourself in it, you'll already have a sense of whether this is something you want to explore further. And if that's for you, you can register for Biology of Leadership through the link in the show notes. So for now, I'm sending you lots of love. Bye for now. Hey, thanks for listening to today's podcast. Can I ask you a favour? If our conversation spoke to you today, could you please take a moment to leave a 5-star review? Your review will help people discover this podcast, and together we can create a world where there's even more love and more laughter. And if you want to hear more from the Project Joyful podcast, just click the subscribe button. Bye for now.